very and very informal. So how are you? How's life? Let's have some conversation here. Really, what I do want to talk to you about are what some of your takeaways were from yesterday. I mean, just go ahead, just some things that maybe stuck in your brain. And by the way, yeah, you do have the right copy of the informational writing piece right now. So that's good.
I think for me, because I've used the language of 6 traits in my scoring guides for years, but I don't know that I ever really stepped the kids through it and explained it to them. I just kind of assumed that by the time they were even in my dual credit senior class, if I was saying, I'm grading you on your ideas, on your organization, that I really went into enough detail to explain the scoring guides to them. I just kind of assumed they had it as well. And I don't know that that's true.
Yeah, you know what they say about assume. Yeah, that's
And if we all go this in a year, somebody
Yeah.
can do that. But if we're not using the same language all the way through,
yeah,
then
common language, exactly. So the scoring guide, you guys have your own scoring guide? that
we
you
all
use?
make up our own
Yeah.
based upon the assignment we're given.
Right. And so that's where, again, you can have some of that language reflected in your scoring guide, like you said, but just making sure that's consistent and that, and we talked about this morning too. And someone from the elementary mentioned the same thing, making sure that you have those vertical conversations
Yes.
that they all know that, when I'm talking about ideas, this is what it means. And you all have a common vision of what ideas truly is. And it's the same way for all the traits. I think conventions, that's pretty solid. Everybody has that expectation. It's more about where they're mastered than anything else and where the students are being held accountable. So if you're a content area teacher, like friends in the back, right? With that, are you guys content area? Or are you at ELA?
ELA.
Okay. When we're, and I'm just making an assumption. Yeah, that's what I thought. But, in the content classes, they also need to know where, what kids are being held accountable for as far as conventions. That's probably one of the biggest complaints I get, they're still not capitalizing or whatever. And sometimes that's because kids are just trying to get their thoughts down too fast, just like we do as adults. You're just stopping to jot it, or they're hurrying just to get it done so they can turn it in. It's just carelessness. They know, that they need to capitalize. And again, I'm just as guilty as anyone else. I text like crazy. I do shortcuts on emails and, different things. I use, acronyms, etc. But I think your content area people, again, need to have the conventions kids are supposed to have mastered, posted, and held accountable for, posted in the classroom, in every room, and just go over those. I don't know how just this is the expectation. It can be on your rubric as well. But again, just that consistent message, that you all have that common language going across all the grade levels is huge. So I think that's a good point, because content area people, you expect them to write it, but your writing is going to look a little bit different for what you're having to do versus our ELA people. So I'm going to slide this way so you don't have to tilt this much. Oh, Marty, you're fine. I think in order to support content area people who went into their content because they're passionate about it, even though your students are reading and writing within your content, you have to know how that writing is woven in and supported within that. So I think it's valuable for them to have that same message, I guess you could say, within the content area as well as anything else. And when I'm saying that, I mean, wherever they're doing any writing, they need to have those convention expectations posted. It's just, I don't care if it's a math classroom, PE, wherever. because P people are having to do a little bit more writing than what they have had in the past. All right, so other takeaways.
I have another takeaway. I love that as far as deciding as a district through grade levels, what expectations are and they can follow kids up. I love that. And then yesterday, this is a little overwhelming.
Oh, definitely.
You know, for
That's for-
125 papers.
Oh, and you would not necessarily, this is for
Right.
you as a teacher.
Right. But you had mentioned, well, if you're talking about voice that particular week, maybe you could just score a paragraph on voice or maybe voice and conventions and just that. So, you know, you can take bits and pieces
Exactly.
and then a big assignment, you know, it doesn't have to be that every time. So,
And
And
even
that's
if
a
you had
huge point.
an essay, a multi-paragraph essay, you could just tell the kids, we've been talking about voice, put a star next to the paragraph. You want me to really judge you on voice or something like that.
yeah.
I've known a lot of, or have heard that from several teachers that I follow a blog online that were doing that. And I think that's, you know, that's such a valuable point to make. And again, you don't have to grade, like you said, Marty, you don't grade every piece of writing for every single trait. Holy cow, that's just be,
Yeah.
you're killing yourselves doing that.
They just need
But
practice.
yes, you
time.
just need the chunk. And there's student-friendly ones. There's different, like I was sharing this morning. There are so many different versions of six trait rubrics out there. A lot of schools take and modify them to make it, when I was teaching, I modified it to fit my kids, my classroom, and put it in the language that worked for me. So I think really what you look at are your standards, you know, always go back to the standards and the expectations there to see just really what you want to emphasize. Same way with your conventions, all that. Conventions are taught, they're woven throughout. And in your handout, there is the writing process that's in there for, especially for our ELA friends that are here. You can see where the traits fit in. I think it's on page, was it? Yeah, 6 and 7. This is kind of old, but you do see how they're woven in when you are teaching the writing process, which I think is helpful. And, you know, conventions are typically addressed in editing, but I know a lot of teachers, they score for conventions on every piece of writing that they're scoring, just because, again, you're holding those kids' feet to the fire. And this is just the way we do business here at Maryville. You know, this is the expectation. My daughter had Janet Jelovich too. And let me tell you, she knows how to write, you know, because Janet held their feet to the fire for sure. So anyway, just be aware that that's in there. Other thoughts, comments? Any takeaways from yesterday?
Erin Pearson, so she's on here. She said that she really enjoyed the positive and negative experiences with writing and thought she might use that with her kids. And then also, Janera said that she's just, her big takeaway is that she is definitely not an ELA teacher, but, you know, just wanted to know how to better support her kids.
Okay, what does Janira teach?
She teaches social studies.
Social studies.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. I hadn't thought about, you know, again, using that positive and negative experience for your students, I think really gives them some insight. You can do that really in any class. I mean, content, you could just ask them, you know, what's been a positive learning experience for you? What's been a negative? One thing I did, this is totally off sixth grade talk, I mean, set that aside. But one thing I did with students one year, and it's an idea I stole from someone else, including this little statement: every teacher's born with larceny in their hearts. You know, you're always stealing from others. But it was an index card at the very beginning of the year. On one side, the kids wrote how they wanted to be praised in front of their peers. And on the back side, they wrote how they wanted to be, or how they like to be, I don't know how to say this, but reprimanded, or corrected in front of their peers. Because, some kids, get very upset if they, get in trouble, other kids are around. So this guy, he just suggested, you have that. Some kids, just want to step out in the hall with you or whatever. Just a little FYI there, made me think about that. So I think this is what we'll do. Since we're small, I do have like different thoughts and ideas, but again, I want this to be very conversational, very discussional oriented. I do not want to just do set and get, because I hate that, and I don't think you probably enjoy it very much either. So any comments or anything else that came out of the discussion yesterday? I thought there was somebody I remember talking to me yesterday about their daughter. So you want to share your comment?
Well, Delaney's been working with the Congressional Hunger Center as an paid intern this summer, which is out of Maryland, but it's all been online, of course. And she's actually she gets assigned to go to these Zoom meetings, and today she was watching Roy Blunt get his Lifetime Achievement Award, and she's talked to people that advise the president. Well, as an intern, it's pretty impressive. But they also talked to them, the people that work there talked to them about careers and whatever. And they said that if you're interested in doing anything like with Washington, D.C., with government, whatever, if you can't write, it doesn't matter what your degree is in or how smart you are. If you can't speak and you can't write, they pretty much just kick you aside and they're done with you. So that was one thing. Another one is she's getting her degrees in biology and economics, and both those areas have basically said they're very concerned about, particularly the STEM field, about people that can do math and science but can't communicate with anybody. And so there's a big push with scientists to teach people how to write. And I don't know, it seems like we don't maybe hit that as well as we should. And there was something else we talked about. 2 years ago, Google, the #1 degree that they were looking for was English, because they had all these computer science people that could code and whatever, but they couldn't talk to anybody. They couldn't communicate. They can't work with anybody. So they were looking for English people that worked over the computer science people, basically telling them what to do and bridging that communication gap between them and everything.
So I thought that was interesting, and that was kind of my experience with, the business that I got to tour virtually, because they were mentioning the same thing. It was like communication skills. They said we can teach them the other things, but if they can't communicate and they can't work, again, like I said, be a team player, then, they typically don't work out well here. So we know those things are important, but we also know that things look just a little bit differently too, for content people. We know our ELA people, again, you're passionate about your subject. How do you fit it all in? So what we'll do is, like I said, go through, we'll have some different takeaways here. And there I am again. And one of the things I think about here is just like the success criteria that you have already for your students. You have to have success criteria. The students need to know what it takes to be successful. So thinking about this in relation to that continuum that you saw from the little kindergartner yesterday, Sarah, and how that was posted. I mean, she knew what it took to be successful. And I equate this to looking up a recipe. When you look up a recipe, especially on the internet, like I do, even though I've got all these cookbooks, I love to get the cookbooks, but then I just don't do anything with them. They're just like decoration, I guess. What do you always see with the recipe on the internet? Pictures. Yeah. It's showing you what success looks like. And like on the Great British Baking Show, which I love that show. They always have, I think it's a technical challenge where they go ahead and they just give a list of ingredients, and the measurements sometimes can be a little off. And they give like some very basic directions, and the bakers are trying to figure out what the heck they're supposed to do with it. And sometimes their products end up less than successful, right? So you've got to have that model of what success looks like. You have to know what that outcome is. And like someone mentioned this morning, they've been showing their kids the final product, the final step to be successful, but they don't show them, sometimes the progression or the steps to get there. So kids need to have that experience to go through and see, okay, really, where am I in relation to this? And again, it goes back to that assessment capable learner, what it takes. This is my goal. Maybe this is my goal. Where am I? And what are the steps it's going to take me to get there? Your special needs kids, I forgot to mention this morning. Your special needs students are really needing that information. They need to know, they need to see that progress that they're making in little steps along the way. So again, just to tie into this, food for thought, if you will. So this is, I just stuck this in here kind of randomly. This is Ellen Gott. She's a middle school teacher at Chillicothe. She was in Teachers Academy several years ago. And that's what I'm looking at you, trying to think here. But anyway, Ellen is, she talked a lot about writing and the difficulty she had finding time to do feedback with her students. And it was a challenge. So I'm going to let you listen to her. She's nervous. Keep that in mind. She's nervous because she's presenting her action research project on writing and finding ways to deliver feedback more effectively. And she's also being videoed, so she's less than comfortable. We'll put it that way. So I'll let you listen. And I have permission to use this, so we'll see how we.
Look up here to fourth grade and 25 first graders that are saying 25 all year long. I'd like to start with a quote. Decades of education research support the idea that by teaching less and providing more feedback, we can produce greater learning. Many researchers agree with this, including Hattie and Marzano. My building has had feedback as a key focus for the last few years, and so I knew I wanted to focus on that. And my district has also focused on math and reading, revising curriculum, and writing content assessments. And so I knew in my classroom, I wanted my SMART goal to focus on writing. I didn't want to leave that out. I wanted it to still be important and focus in my classroom. So I developed the SMART goal. The percentage of students who are in proficient or advanced on the writing traits of ideas will increase from 42% to 70% by March 2015 as measured by the 6th grade scoring guide. I teach writing in a workshop format. The materials that I needed included writer's notebooks. I'm going to show you some ways that I gave feedback electronically, and so I utilized the 3 iPads that I have available in my classroom. I also, my school uses checkpoints and benchmarks, and so I've included those in your handouts, some of the common checkpoints and benchmarks that we use. And then just a lot of opportunities for my students to write. And so I've listed some of the writing prompts that we've used, including some major texts and resources that I use throughout the year. My action was to be more intentional with feedback and to try some new forms of feedback. I continued one-on-one conferences that I've used for several years in Writers Workshop. And I also increased the modeling that I used. I felt like that was a way to strengthen the entire class in areas that I saw weaknesses in, and a way to give all students feedback at the same time. After a day at Teacher Academy where we saw a teacher giving feedback with an iPod, I went back and tried it with an iPad, and so this is an electronic conference that a student would have listened to on the iPad. I think you click on my face. Chase, thanks for writing to me. Some things I really like about this paper, I like your concluding sentences, like I had a good conclusion. I can get every once in a while, it's good, you should get it. You have a paragraph, you indent it, you have a topic sentence and all of your other details stuck to that topic. A goal I have for you is to continue to think about where your thoughts end and where that period needs to go. Where do you hear the pauses? You have one period right now at the very end of all your writing. And so I want you to listen to me read it with the pauses where I can tell you want them to be, but you gotta put that period in there so your reader knows that's where your thought ends. My favorite meal is cheeseburgers with, sorry, let me start over. My favorite meal is cheese bites with a hamburger and fries. I get it at the Chillicothe Sonic. The Sonic people make it. I eat it every once in a while. It's good. You should get it. Keep working on putting a period at the end of each thought. Some words that I have for your spelling list. With, it's kind of tricky, the what sound and the WH sound. With is just a W, W-I-T-H. It. Chillicothe, tricky, but you need to know how to spell it since it's your hometown. Capital C-H-I-L-L-I-C-O-T-H-E. And then should, S-H-O-U-L-D. Thanks for writing, so keep working. Some other forms of feedback that I use was I always shared the scoring guide that I used with them for whatever the writing task was, and I've included the idea scoring guide that I used throughout the year for this project. I wanted students to get feedback in a variety of ways, and so I couldn't always give them as much feedback as I wanted to, and so I wanted to utilize peers in the classroom, and so I felt like that needed strengthened. It's like we talked about earlier, of them not just saying, good job, they really needed trained on how to give good feedback. And so we modeled good conferences and bad conferences. In your handout, there's some of the tools that I use, 3 stars and a wish. I took compass points from Teacher Academy and changed it into a peer editing. I have the N, be needs, what does this paper need? E, excitement, what's exciting about this paper? S, does the sequence make sense? And W, worries, what worries you about this paper? And then also in your handout, there's a great tutorial from Rewrite Think, and so there's some of the paperwork in there as well that I use to train my peer editors. So my data.
So you want to hear how her data came out? Or I think you're getting the point here. I can't remember. She was successful. She did have more success. She would just be mortified if she knew I was showing this to you, but she knows I have it and I have free reign, so it's all good. So one of the things I wanted you just to be aware of was how she approached feedback in some different ways. And the electronic part of that worked really well for her. She said it, there were some questions I just remember at the end of the presentation that she talked about how it saved her so much time, to do that, because what she did with her students in the workshop model, she had worked pretty much, she did her whole group lesson, which whole group, that can go anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. And then she worked with small groups, and she just had it set up a little bit differently where they rotated through different things. And I honestly don't know what her time block was. I don't remember, but she had the audio feedback with the iPad be one of the centers, because she said that way kids, they don't have to wait for her. They could go ahead and start writing. And you heard, and she's either 4th or 5th grade, a teacher, but yeah, it's important to know how to spell Chillicothe. She's given some spelling tips. Still at that level, they couldn't spell with, but anyway, I just thought that was kind of an interesting approach to delivering feedback, just a way to think about it a little bit differently. So I don't know if that's something that's helpful for you or not, but I don't know. What are your thoughts? Remember, I told you have to talk, because I'm not going to just, I am a talker and I could just sit here and just chat about nothing all afternoon, but I don't think that's healthy.
Whether it's email, as an attachment or using the Google Docs, that's helped me a lot to be able for kids to send me rough drafts and I can just shoot them a little email or put a comment on it and say, here are the 3 things I think you need to work on or whatever.
And then we've had to find some creative ways to do things, especially after the last year and sad to say, possibly the upcoming year. There's a reason I'm sitting away from everybody. So, no offense, but, so I think that's what we have to think about a little, getting outside the box and hearing and seeing what other people are doing, how they're handling different things. So I don't know how you deliver feedback. I don't know, like in the content areas you guys teach, how you do that, or do you do feedback? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna add, our learning management system does allow audio and video recording to your submissions
Awesome.
that you could add in. It doesn't go in the grading portion of it, but it would have it as an attachment if they reopen their assignment, it would be there. Is that feasible with 70 to 80 freshmen every year? Time constraint, absolutely not. I mean,
No,
it's not
no.
with teaching 6 hours a day.
No,
with
you
one-
can't do
1 hour
that.
prep. I mean,
no,
it's not, but maybe for 28 government students for a line here or there, probably.
well, and again, like Marty mentioned earlier, doing just a chunk of the text. I think too, that you have to, again, I didn't live in your world, so I can't speak to that. Sandy Wood is a good friend of mine, so I hear how things are in the high school world frequently. And the good, bad, and ugly, whatever, but because we've had that conversation about feedback, and she's just like, it is physically impossible, emotionally, and everything. So I think a couple of thoughts on that. I would rotate kids out, like on what days you looked at certain students' work, like so many students this day that you give feedback to, so many like on Tuesday, so many on Wednesday, and so on. That would be one approach I would look at. When you're doing multiple sections of a class, that's a challenge because you have a lot of kiddos. I think one thing Ellen talked about that I would really look into is the peer editing piece. I think once you train kids and do it, like she mentioned, they said they were doing peer editing, but in reality, they probably weren't. Like I shared with Brian earlier, I always go back to Harry Wong's book, First Days of School. And if we have any new books in here, I wholeheartedly, I don't know where you use it.
Yeah.
I would totally recommend you.
I'm
get that
looking
book.
right now. So.
Yeah. So yes, you're willing to learn. And in that, he talks a lot about procedures and spending the first couple of weeks on procedures, just getting things established and set. This is the way we do business in this classroom, because kids don't always understand or know that. And I would have it set up the same way Ellen mentioned for the peer editing. She mentioned how you have to model that, where she got some of those tips and ideas. And I may have a copy of her presentation. I'll have to double check on that to see. Otherwise, I can always reach out to her. She's a great gal, but I think that would be something maybe you could follow up on. Especially, I'm not talking about grading. I'm talking about getting feedback and having those next steps and where to go and how to continue to build as a writer. Other thoughts or ideas that you guys have used that you've found successful? I mean, feedback's the other thing about feedback, let me mention this, I'm not giving you time to think, but with that being said, feedback does not have to be lengthy. Feedback can be 1 to 3 minutes. That's all you need. Really, like she mentioned, even with her peer editors, she kind of gave them a list of what you need to do, where you need to go from. So that's what I would suggest. It's always that KISS principle, keep it simple. I won't say the last word, but keep it simple. Less is more. Pick out what you heard her when she was giving her example, what was working and what they needed to work on. She integrated a little bit of the spelling, grammar, that lesson within that. So that's something that I would consider. I was, I don't know, I gave probably too much feedback sometimes to my kids. And then what happens? You know, they're overwhelmed. It's too much. It's just like we were talking yesterday about, you know, some of those college papers that some of us had as a negative experience. You know, you get a paper back and it's got all this stuff on there and you think, well, or it doesn't have anything. It just has a letter grade. You just, regardless, you just think, I stink, you know, I might as well just stop now. I'm not going to change anything. But sometimes your kids don't always respond to the feedback either. So that opens up opportunities for other conversations with them. In the ages that you all have, it's harder to change bad habits. We know that as adults, it's hard to change our ways. And some of your kids might already have bad habits and still, but they need to know that there's a way to get out of that. All right.
Patty, I think one of the
Yes, go
things Josh was talking about, the number. I know I probably ought to look at rough drafts, but I just leave it up to the kids. If they want me to look at a rough draft, then I'll look at it and give them feedback, but I don't require it. So that drops my number from, 70 down to probably about 20 some.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. And that's the other thing, like you mentioned earlier, about finding that place where the kids want you to look. What do you want me to check out on this paper? And that's giving ownership back to them. I think that's a huge piece. And really, it is their writing. They do own it. They need to keep that.
And that's one thing, like with my honors juniors. If they ask for a rough draft, what do you want me to look for? Because I don't have the time to physically sit down and go through your entire paper. Like, what do you know that you normally struggle with? And then what do you want me to particularly focus on?
Yes.
And sometimes they go, well, I don't have any idea. And some of them are aware enough, they go, well, I know I always struggle with these two things. Will you focus on those?
Well,
But
and
yeah, we're doing enough prep work where they recognize their own
right,
struggles.
right.
Yeah.
And that's where that peer editing can come in handy too. If you set them up with that, where they've kind of gone through and looked at different models and things where they start knowing what strong writing is, that's the thing. Have them put down what they think they did really well on in their writing, as well as where they need help. I think that's something else that is key for them. Again, it all goes back. Your kids are at the age where they need to own it. It's their learning. And I say that even to elementary teachers, it's theirs. I mean, I'm not going to be following them around the rest of their lives, telling them what to put down on a piece of paper. That's just the reality. So they have to have that understanding of what it does make a strong writer. Okay. Well, we'll just skip Ellen here. There we go. So just a little quick review here, what the traits were. It's, again, not a program. I just like to emphasize that. It's just kind of a common language, a common message, reinforcing that within the writing process, like we've talked about before. And so we have the rubric, you have the right informational one. Use that like you want to use it. You can go ahead and Google other information writing templates. There's a lot of different ones out there. This is one again for you. You might share it with kids that are, it's going to totally depend on your students. Like if it's an honors class, I would probably share it with them. But if it's not, I think it's like Marty said, or I think it was Marty, it's going to be totally overwhelming with them. So keep that in mind or take it and make it your own after you have those vertical conversations. What do we want to keep? What do we want to get away from? But when you do give it with kids, go through it. You know, what does this mean? What's an example of clear, like I used yesterday? What's an example of vivid? You know, what does that mean? What does that look like? So I just want to do a little review here about disciplinary literacy. This is something that I just came across out of the ASCD journal. And I found I thought it was very interesting because they're talking about the literacy skills that are within the discipline. So like in the social studies classroom, what does writing look like? They're going to, in that classroom, learn what writing is for a different purpose than it's going to be in the ELA classrooms. So when you're thinking about scientists or science, when scientists write, they have to use very precise vocabulary. That is a big deal. We have learned that the last year and a half. That's very important, right? They typically compose in phrases, bullets, graphs, sketches, use passive voice. Now that depends on who's writing it. Bill Nye, the science guy, doesn't use necessarily passive voice. But in most science journals and things that you're reading, it's not going to be evident who wrote the article necessarily. So that's one thing. Favor exactness over craft or elaboration. And communication is in a very systematic format. So going through it. History, here we go. When historians write, they create timelines with accompanying narratives. You guys need to say, that's me, if it works for you, okay? Synthesize information, evidence from multiple sources. That's definitely you. I've been in enough sessions with Dixie Groupie. I know that information. Emphasize coherent organization of ideas. Grapple with multiple ideas and large quantities of information. It is very overwhelming. And then your essays are typically based on argumentative principles. So they're all nodding back there. Math. We don't always think about what writing looks like in math, but you can share with your colleagues. They do. They have to explain, justify, describe, estimate, or analyze. Favor calculations over words, use precise vocabulary. Again, that's very important in math. Give reasons and examples, and they utilize real world situations. One thing like in one classroom, I remember reading about, they had the math problem already up on the whiteboard, and the students had to explain how they would have solved the problem. I decided, and they're writing, they just come in, it's kind of like their bell work. So ELA friends, engage in a process that includes drafting, revising, and editing. So you've got that writing process there. You're going to use mentor texts. You pay attention to all these things that we were talking about with traits, right? Rely on the feedback of others and try not to do that formula writing. That's one thing, the state assessment that they came across statewide was the kids were following just either like a very structure, the same common organizational structure, or what was the other thing? When they were citing text evidence, they weren't really explaining it in their words. They were just straight out kind of copying it and sticking it in there, cutting and pasting. And that did not earn them any extra points, right? So just an FYI there. So thinking about that and where we're going to go, we're just going to do some activities here. I'm going to try and embed some content in here as well as keep our 6 trait focus so we can support you all and continue to support you.
Can I interject something?
You interject away.
So obviously I'm in the library, but when you said support with mentor text, I feel as though our next step is also to include our reading teachers. Because they're sharing that all the time. And I mean, so many times I could say, listen to the voice of this particular character, or, just the various traits within published text that they interact with all the time. So I'm just thinking, not only support writing and social studies, but also,
It definitely supports reading, and if students are, the more prolific and varied readers they are, they tend to be stronger writers. Because, goodness, you've had all these mentor texts to look through, your vocabulary has improved. Yeah, it's just, it goes hand in hand with
it's
everything
that common
else.
language. We can
Yes.
all use it.
Yes, yes, and hopefully, with the elementary, what they've been doing, that you'll start seeing that reflected in the middle of high school as well. And then you'll start finding that your kids will use that same language, which is kind of exciting, I think. So we talked about ideas yesterday, and I always think about with those three: clarity, focus, and quality details, keeping in that relevant information. So one of the things I use here, and Marty might be familiar with this, but it's the how-to poems. So a lot of times, I'm going to probably say some things that are going to maybe make some people upset, but the 5-paragraph essay came about as just to help teachers grade things easier. And it was back like in the 1900s or something. I've got the information somewhere. And writing becomes too formulaic that way when they're doing that. So we have to think about, okay, how can we still find out the same kind of information and get kids out of doing that formula type of writing, which was, the 5-paragraph essay was, like I said, to benefit teachers in their grading. If you go like to the UK or someplace else, they call it the American essay because they don't use that format, there. I just thought that was interesting. So one of the things Barry Lane, who I referenced yesterday, and I forgot that book, gosh darn it, that was one I meant to bring. What he talks about is the how-to poem. So you can still find out if kids know something, but in just a different format. So with this, how to be an amoeba, date yourself, never eat out, look in the mirror. If you don't like what you see, split. You know what an amoeba is. How to be a fraction, be half of what you are. Realize your lifespan will never be greater than 1. When trying to be equal, treat your top half the same as your bottom. Multiply with other fractions. Spend 1/3 of your time being improper. Simplify. Only be mixed if you are of the proper religion. Be careful when you cross multiply. Convert to decimalism. Know that if you've had half as much fun as I've had twice as much fun as you. Do they know what fractions are? Pretty obvious here. How to be a good slave. It's by Harriet Tubman. Do what master tells you. Never share what you feel in your heart. Know that freedom is only for folks with white skin. Never even think of running away. Never look north. Never peer through the tears. Don't listen to train whistles. Okay. Yeah. Does that give you an interpretation of what it means to be a good slave? So with that being said, how-to poems are an effective way and a shorter way of finding out some of the information that you would like to discover your kids have attained. So first off, you have to get the facts for your topic. And they have to make a list of the 6 to 10 really good facts. And Barry Lane refers to those as the potatoes, because when you're talking about potatoes, potato plant, you see just the green stuff, but we don't eat that, right? Because it's not good for us. It would make you very sick. So what do? You dig for those potatoes. They're under the ground. You have to look for them a little bit more. Jackie. So you have to dig for those potatoes. Then you're going to write the poem using verbs. You start out with a verb. Do this, don't do that. You may have noticed on some of these others, how it starts out that way. So what else are you doing? Helping with parts of speech. And then just let the kids share out, their different poems. So you're going to do a how-to poem. So in your packet on page 8 are the directions. We're just talking about how-to poems. So like here's a Harriet Tubman one. Alternative to doing research paper. You guys are quiet, you scare me. I just want you to know that. So you have the same directions here. And on your next page, you're going to write about golden toads. So on page 9, if you just turn to the back side of this, there are your facts about golden toads. Remember, you're going to pick out 6 to 10. Now, we have 3 people in each group, or if you prefer to work solo, that's totally up to you. But otherwise, just work in a triad if you would like. It's just your call. If anybody wants to partner with Brian, he wrote one earlier.
Oh, that's amazing.
You'd have a ringer in your group there. So any clarifying questions? Nope. All right. And people at home, good luck. Sorry, I don't have the facts on the sheet.
What
so.
page was that on in the package?
It's
I
on
did
page
email it to you.
9. Oh, did you? Page 9 are the facts. So you can write your poems. Remember to start with the verb. I'll put those directions back up there. You can see them? Yes.
All right.
Oh,
Trouble
gonna do
lights,
the
yeah.
lights. Okay. I might go to sleep, but it's afternoon.
I know,
so.
right?
Think about it too. A way that I do this is think about it as a newscast. When you're on television, they only have like a time for like a 20 to 30 second little blip on the news. And I used an example of a dog this morning. So if a dog is lost, they don't say, okay, breaking news. The dog is missing. It has 4 legs, a tail, and it barks. That doesn't tell you what those aren't relevant facts. You want to know, hey, it has metal studs on its collar. It answers to the name of Harry. You want those really relevant details. All right, turn you loose. Give you about 10 minutes. Oh, it is.
They all were.
There you go.
You're so respectful. What? Because they would have been. Is it kind of downtown? Yeah, right. Oh, on the Coast Street. Okay, yeah. So I don't have that. And autumn houses. What is it?
Yeah. You do writing?
Six to 10. He's four toads. No. I've got like facts in my head. I just don't want to start. Except for Snappy. When they were discovered.
Yeah, beginning, middle income.
Yeah. Or is it like?
How
You
changing.
know? That's our quiet group. We just got them to say.
Have you guys all signed in?
I just.
Everybody? Okay, you guys at the back row have all signed in.
Do we have to start it with a verb? You need to start it with a verb, yes. Oh, my, mic drop in the back, okay. You guys good?
We're good.
Didn't expect any less over here. So we'll give you a few more minutes here. And hopefully our folks at home are cruising right along.
I almost think of it like.
You are going to get to share, so. So you can decide who's going to share, who's going to be your reporter.
Yeah. But it's gotta be.
We'll give this table a little bit. They may need to talk to a friend. They may need to phone a friend.
The library, they hold everything.
Yeah. Don't overthink it.
And we are. Busted would be the verb.
Just stare at it. Put some pressure on us, peer pressure here.
Okay, so. Busted.
Let's just let them fly. We didn't even worry so much. Let's take this.
Scanning them. so I can
Oh,
remember.
yes. Oh, yeah, that's great. And if they're all on that Library of Congress site too, that is a wonderful site. You know, your info as a curriculum director. I just love it. It's just
Yes.
archives.org is.
Oh, so they always lived above.
Okay, are you guys good?
We need a little bit more time.
Well, you know, no rush. Yeah, we're here till
Writers, we're
3,
trying to-
yeah. it's okay.
Are you all done?
Yeah, they're all done. You're finished.
I wouldn't mark it down as spectacular.
Maybe,
They all start with birds.
do you need a lifeline? Do you need to phone a
We
friend
do
here?
have a clarifying question we were gonna Google, but we might as well just ask you. So the Costa Rican cloud forest.
Mhm.
Explain to me what a cloud forest.
It's the trees that grow on top of clouds.
Silence.
They're-
So
I'm trying to figure out
we're,
whether you're processing that or not.
Yeah, I know.
we're imagining people like explorers in the rainforest and the toads were above sight line, up in the clouds and the trees. Why are you laughing at me?
I'm guilty for what we've written. The amount of thought that you have put into this is what I'm saying. Can I just pause and read what we wrote?
Yes.
And then compare it to.
Yeah, go
This
for
is
it.
what ours says. Hop, mate, hide, repeat. Avoid red states and toad lickers.
Yeah, you didn't need to know what a cloud forest is.
Weirdly.
We have a good first line.
Well,
First line.
Yeah.
Well,
You guys
we'll
are stuck
we'll
there.
have you share that.
It
We'll listen,
grabs your attention.
we'll listen to
Good.
another model for you, and then we can go ahead and go from there.
I'm kind of nervous about saying it.
No pressure, Josh.
Johnny Jackson's really good. I don't know. Okay, so just have to start with a verb, right?
Uh,
Okay,
Well, and contain those, you know,
Facts.
yes, the facts that are less than, you know,
Okay,
obvious.
this is pretty straightforward. Discovered in 1963 in the tropical paradise of Costa Rica. Live on land and water. Fornication and laying eggs is the best time to see one. Licking golden toads is not recommended. Witnessed in nature for the last time in, in 1989. Disappeared mysteriously from assumed pesticide use.
Okay.
Very good.
Two. Do you want to share your first line? We'll have you do that.
Please share, Marty.
Yeah.
So I need to use fornication.
Yes, if it ends in ION, it's a noun.
I kept going back and forth.
And I have a question as to like, who's doing the fornicating, if that's when you're also sleeping.
We also didn't say who were doing the mating.
We did not, we did not.
The toads are keeping it on.
Oh,
Okay, here's our first line.
It's gonna be
It's a
good.
good one. Busted. Our cover was blown in 1963 in the Costa Rican clouds.
Good.
there you go.
It has
was a
potential.
wonderful start.
Yes.
No fortification.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to grade you down.
Well, they were only one line in. What you-
Okay, I don't even know where to go from here. I'm just kind of like, all right, you know, it's just kind of, you know, we kind of digressed after lunch.
Sorry.
So when you think about this in a regular, normal classroom, you would go ahead, this is something you could have your students do. The main point being, always do something, you know, model first. Let them work with a partner or partners next. You could do it like, for those of you that are ELA people, you could have them work in small group, but like a small group with you leading it. Wouldn't have to necessarily be a whole class instruction, or you could introduce it as a whole class model for your, you know, initial lesson in like 5-15 minutes or whatever. Model that for them, and then when you meet with them in small groups, give them more assistance as needed, and then you can turn them loose to do it, you know, individually. One of the things that'd be kind of cool with this, I just was thinking about it, is doing it as like a choice board kind of activity. You could ask them that maybe they have to report out on something, but it could be a choice whether they choose to do a how-to poem, whether they choose to do like an essay, whether they choose to, do it through an images, PowerPoint, something like that. The point is, do they understand the topic? Do they know, the gist of it? And can they communicate that thinking? So I've kind of become a little bit more of a fan of like choice boards, or they might be called something else in your world, but just a thought. People at home doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
Alright.
just wanted to check here after all this conversation that some of us were discussing. Questions about this or thoughts? Anything that you think you might use? I want you just to go ahead and talk at your tables about what this might look like in, your setting. This food for thought here. You don't have to whisper, you can talk loud.
As far as like, I mean, especially. Like, what artists and artists from I'm thinking just because she's close to me. She isn't.
They were still.
Just gonna check, I was gonna put times on these, so this was yesterday, 8 to what,
8
noon?
to noon,
And these are 8 to,
8 to 11, or 12 to 3.
okay, so 3 hours here,
Yes. Yes.
so those are here. Okay. Do you know, there's some people on this list that didn't show up, do you know why? I mean, it doesn't really matter, I just wonder.
No.
We had a couple Zoomers, I know she had sick kids, she was, her leg, I think there's somebody else, I saw.
Yes, yes.
Sophie Schofield and Kate Phillips, but she was only one day and not the other.
Yeah, so I'm not for sure where she was coming from. I didn't talk to her about
So
her.
maybe
She's hopped on.
I need to check and see if she hopped on yesterday, or she was not. Okay, make
Yeah,
sure.
She's actually in Montana for the summer. That's
Oh,
where
wow.
She does that every summer. again.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So-
Like, so I think they've got
See if there's any,
sick kids. and stuff.
one else that was like Barb Mackey was there, but she's not here today at all.
Yeah, she did tell us that. She
Okay.
felt that she was.
So let's
Just
think
wanted to make
about
sure
this in
that
your
she didn't
content
miss.
from your
Everything else
perspective.
is good.
What are some
Okay,
ways
perfect.
that you might
Okay,
use this?
sounds good.
Oh, you're fine, Becky.
Share what Dennis had said.
Oh, okay.
The Harriet Tubman Harriet play, we do like a Holocaust unit, so we like how to be an inmate, like in an internment camp. And so there's like
Oh,
the-
wow.
So,
Yeah, that would be very powerful.
Yeah, because then he shares all of his different survival tips and I mean, or even like the relationships with different people. like that.
Yes, and that's one thing we got in discussion about today too, because that even when you're taking on that role, you're taking on the voice really of that person, and it's helping to build some empathy, which,
Right, right.
getting into that social emotional,
Mhm.
which I think a lot of kids need to build that skill. Yeah, very good point. Thank you for sharing. Other thoughts about how this might look in your setting, in your classroom or content area that you might do how to. They were talking about like taking on, like when they do their Holocaust unit, like someone who's in one of the internment camps. Other
I have to mention, Amy just mentioned, because we were talking about teaching credible sources
Mhm.
that yesterday and how I can help with that. We could do a how-to poem on credible sources.
Oh, yeah,
Would be so
out
good
of the
for
box
all of
thinking.
them.
Yes, very much so. Something they really need as well. Yeah, in every area. Okay. What about social studies back here?
Probably the one we talked at length, like if we always do a review day beforehand before we take a test, and we could see with like our freshmen. If you had divided them into pairs and gave each pair 2 terms, but nobody else knows their terms and they have to create a how-to poem. They post their how-to poem without the title into the discussion board on Schoology. The kids then in class have to guess what their topic is in relation to the how-to poem. So you're recognizing the content that's right in front of you as you're reviewing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I like that idea too. You guys doing good for afternoon. That's pretty rocking it there. I think too, even just like coming back to school, I think how to be a student, how to be, a sophomore, how to be a senior, how to be a teacher, how to be an administrator, curriculum director, well, you can make it be, the sky's the limit. But the important thing is they have to have the facts. So you need to be sure they have those from a credible source that they can utilize in their how-to poems. This is something that I always I love this activity because there were so many different directions that it could take. And it was short, quick, and simple. So thanks for sharing, guys. Something else that I've done too with ideas is I always found, allergy season. My students would not always, they've noticed the obvious details, but they did not notice the less than obvious details. So for some of you, this is probably very familiar. And how I did this activity, I call it 4 quadrants. I take this picture. Well, first of all, I ask students, what they notice. Sorry, Becky.
No, I can see yours.
Okay, I ask them, what do they notice? And so they do, call out the obvious things, right? So like for you guys, what's something you notice just right off the bat? What?
The woman.
The woman, right, there's a woman there. You might notice, yeah, you see some other things there. So I divide it into 4 quadrants. Just basically take the picture and cut it into 4 sections. And then I give each group a section. And then they go ahead and they pull out what are some of those less than obvious details that they note. And I know this is kind of hard to see. Depending on time frames, I will print this off and give it to groups and have them come up with a little summary of what they've noticed. But here, what do you notice here in this quadrant? Just popcorn out. What are some things you see? Trains. Yeah. Trains. What else did you say?
Telegraph.
Yeah, telegraph lines here.
And that's good because before I was like, what is she holding? And I could see it was like a rope of some sort, but I couldn't. Now you can see that she's connected to those.
Yes.
But I didn't see that before.
Probably assume it's the Mississippi River.
Why do you say that?
Probably assume it's the Mississippi River,
And why do you say that?
gateway of the West. I mean, if you go look at Clark and look at like the beginning of Western Extension, you just understand the picture in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys, I know you know what this is.
Like,
And then in
there's
this one?
mountains on the one side of the picture, like on the left side of the picture. Yeah.
And then here's the 3rd quadrant. Right. Yep.
Which then leads to your Oregon Trail homesteaders, and the Pony Express rider right above. the lake.
Yeah. You know what? You're one of the
Here's your
few
local-
people that's noticed that. And then the bottom quadrant, bottom right.
Stagecoach.
Mhm. Your stagecoach. So with that, let me take you back here. Are those all details that you would have maybe noticed or really popped out at you if you had seen it just from the whole picture perspective? So this is one thing I just have done with certain groups, and we just pull out all those different things that we notice. We have that conversation about it. Do you want to tell them what the title? Do you remember what this is called? Anybody in here? It's the Manifest Destiny. Yeah, that's it, Manifest Destiny. And it is, it's talking about the westward expansion, everything that entailed and what happened. And like I think Jackie was talking here about the book. Not really, and I'm trying to remember what the title is on the book.
Yeah.
I Googled it and that escapes me right now, so, you know, if you wanna Google, but like here, you know, when you mentioned, you know, what that was, and then how that's connected in to the telegram. And it's again, not something that you would necessarily pay attention to if you're looking at the picture as a whole. So this takes us back to the trait of ideas, that focus, the clarity, and those details, those less than obvious details that you really want to bring in. So when you're having conversation, if you're in a content area, this again is a way that you can reinforce the trait of ideas. And then this is where I also utilize the primary source analysis tool. And this is the one that I shared yesterday, that they just have so many wonderful, rich resources with that. I'm trying to remember, I did, yay me, okay. I was having brainstorms last night and I was revamping things, so I have to reconsider. I think that's me. And Brian is going to go ahead and pass this out to you. So we're going to kind of take this that next kind of step beyond the manifest destiny quadrant activity. And Brian has this PowerPoint.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, did you? Okay.
Is it okay if I just share like a view only copy of that, or should I download it as PDF and send it?
I don't
Or
know.
does
I
it
don't know
matter?
what'll happen to it. It's
Okay.
like a PowerPoint for you guys. So I guess
Sweet,
you
okay.
can do whatever you want with it, but it is on my Google.
Just so it helps jog my memory.
Yeah, I don't, no, I don't care.
Okay.
Like I said, teachers are born with varsity in their hearts, so
Right,
you
right.
want to go ahead and share where you can. And I stole that statement too. So what you're going to look at now is an image. I'm just going to click her down. And you're going to use the observe, reflect, question, and the further investigation sections on your sheet. Now, I would just want to share with you, do you have to have this sheet? No, you can do it however you want to in your classroom. But, you know, Library of Congress created this, and I'm like, oh, go ahead and share the wealth, right? So I'm going to ask that you look at this image, and I'm going to ask you questions about this image. First thing I want to ask is, what do you notice first? And I want you to put that in the observe column. What do you notice first? What was the one thing you noticed first? Okay, then under the reflect column, I want you to answer, who do you think was the audience for this image? Who do you think the audience was for this image? And under the question, what are you wondering about? Some of you might be having flashbacks to the Golden Codes. And down under the further investigation section, I want you to think about, what do you think happened 1 minute after this picture was taken? And once you've finished, just go ahead and share some of these with the folks at your table. Your observations, your wonders. What do you think happened? Share that with the folks at your table.
Okay, I can even confirm that that's. That's what I said. I said that the middle, like, first thing was the middle part looked like a king's crown. Oh. I said, means question mark. But and then I said photography class or presentation. The question, that's like, what kind of lens? That was my question, like, what was it, a photograph? Was it? Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it was.
I don't think that's what that is. So your audience, we're like arts. Yeah. Okay, I said you're the national geographic. I almost said. Nature literature science. And this.
Okay. You guys, oh, go ahead and finish sharing. You want to rush you. Does anybody have one that they, something at the table that they want to share out, group wise? Any thoughts or wonderings that you might have, or reflection? Uh-oh. I don't know, that's that one table back there, so. I have to think.
What's gonna happen a minute after hug? The ladybug is gonna lick its lips. I think it's going to feed.
You don't have lips though.
I don't know. Do you know they don't have lips? Do you have
Yes.
multiple sources to prove it?
So again, it's one of those things where we can investigate to find out more. And this is just it's a image that I found on a science website. It was they just had multiple different ones to utilize. Some of the images I shared yesterday were from the New York Times, has phenomenal images and I think I may have included one in your presentation. I'm thinking I did, that we'll look at for a different purpose a little while later, but those are sites that you can find just all kinds of information on for every, it doesn't matter what you teach. The New York Times, it's phenomenal. As far as different kinds of resources here. I do not know, I'm, now talking about the ladybug, yeah, I'm kind of seeing it on the big screen, makes me think maybe, yeah, it does look like a ladybug to me. I don't know what it is because I didn't look that up to see, I just grabbed the image. What I want you to think about though with this activity, and when I do images like this with groups, and if I did this with students, I would make sure that they had the image at their table or however you guys teach. It just makes it, they hone in on things a little bit more, especially like if they're sitting like you guys are over here, if there's two on each side, I give them, each set of partners an image to look at. Sometimes what I do though, is I mix them up so they have two different images. So they're not looking and, borrowing from the other set of partners. So they're looking at it from a different perspective. So, just think about what you're teaching and how you can involve that. The only, and I talked about this yesterday, that you can use black and white images. I know you guys probably are limited in your access to color, printing. So, that's one thing. I don't know how that works here, but, or you can share it just like I did with you. That's another way to utilize it. There are a variety, Marty, can I ask you a favor? Would you pass these out? There are a variety, thank you, variety of questions you can ask under each category. And again, Library of Congress. So I just picked and chose based on what I felt like doing. You'll probably have more purpose behind yours, but just keep in mind that, thanks, Marty. Keep in mind that on the Library of Congress site, they do have the same set of types of questioning for music, for film, for manuscripts, for maps, for, I can't even think, speeches. There's just a variety, and it's just a really underutilized resource I have found in our region. So I go out and I spread the word. I should get some kind of gratuity, I think, from them, but they probably are unaware that I'm doing this. All right. So any questions before we go on to organization? Any food for thought? One thing I do want to have you do before we go on is just want you to reflect a little bit about the activity we just did and what that might look like, or what you might use it with in your classroom, because right now you have time to think about that. And when school starts, you're just hitting the ground running. So think about, how do you want to utilize this? One thing when you are using this, the question, the one with all the questions on it, you'll find that you'll use some more than others because it's what your natural teacher fit is. So sometimes you have to kind of get outside your comfort zone, mix it up a little bit. Okay, so I just want to give you that time to reflect a little bit. We'll go on to organization here. And we talked about this yesterday, but I want to revisit a little bit about reports and questioning. Before we go on to this, you have been sitting a long time on hard chairs, right? So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. So we'll start back up about 1:45, okay? All right, so go or take a snooze or whatever you need right now to keep you going. Everybody's good?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
In a good way.
Oh, I just think you said swim basket.
What I can tell
That's one thing. I was gonna do that.
Yes, just so good.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought,
It's just something.
Yes.
At first I didn't like it, but then it's like, yeah, yeah. It's not, so not to get copies of it, so. I think it's looks like 7 as far as the size of the book and everything. Because I think people probably have a thing on the site, but I don't think they've changed formats or anything. A lot of places are still updating, so. Uh-huh. Yeah. I use it enough that it's pretty much second nature to me now, but it's, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, a lot of those do for you, really.
Right.
So those are,
I got it.
those are the easy ones.
So I think I got it in 2004.
You know.
Sure. So Sarah, right, Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your last name?
Walker.
Walker, okay. Brian Lynn, I'm Coordinator Student Services. I don't know, I work a little bit with like this and Schoology, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So is this your first year teaching?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so just fresh out of
Gosh,
college.
yeah, and I'm actually not even graduated yet. I graduate in December, so I'm kind of on a provisional, whatever that's called.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
instead of student teaching, I just started.
Oh, okay, okay.
I'm very new.
Very, very new.
Yeah,
All right, well, it's good to have you.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm starting to get real.
yeah. So what kind of experiences, like practicum wise, have you had so far then?
So practicum, we just had prac one, and it was last semester that I had it, so we didn't actually get to like go into classrooms with COVID and stuff really.
Oh,
We had a
wow.
week out, and I was here with Miss Lorby. And I was already hired at that point, so they kind of knew that I was coming in, but it was still kind of like they didn't know what exactly I was teaching.
Uh-huh.
So I had that. I did sub like my sophomore and my junior year.
Okay,
I've been in classrooms, but it's just now it's like my own.
yeah,
The lesson plan.
yeah. Good deal. Good deal. Well, you got a good team, but holler if you need anything at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, you'll be going through tomorrow
Yep.
too, right? With the first year teacher training, so I'll see you tomorrow.
Everything figured out.
Yeah.
Excited for that.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from Trenton.
Okay, gotcha.
So we got a lot of people around here that I know.
Yeah.
Like a lot of Trenton people are coming here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. No, yeah. It's not
It is. There's a good pie place.
No.
Slice of pie.
Oh, well, I think it's, I can't remember if it's Train. I don't know. It's a unique place. I've only been there once, but the nephew went to school there.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
check it out.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get started back up here. I know, I just saw Jackie, so I know she's on her way back. This is just going back into organization just for a quick review. You guys are fine. You are right on, we'll just, no, you're fine, you're totally fine. So with this, I was just going to share, there's different ways to go ahead to organize your writing for when you're thinking about reports. So thinking about that structure there, a lot of times you get questions about how long does it have to be, right? That used to drive me nuts because I'm like, I don't know, I don't live in your head, I have no idea, you know, there's going to be, sometimes they have to do that kind of writing. That's just the reality. But there are times when you can get out of that and have kids write in a different structure. So the business that we partnered, or they had that partnership with this summer, or Yeah, it was summer, thinking about blogs, that's what they're looking for. Like you were talking, are kids effective communicators in written and oral language? So could they do a blog? Could it be a song? Song lyrics are great. Song lyrics also teach fluency, sentence fluency, rhythm and flow, great vocabulary in some cases, depending on your song selection. Could it be a newspaper, news magazine article? Doesn't have to be the same thing. What do you want? They have to know who their audience is. There has to be a purpose for the writing. It might be you're the audience. It might be their peers. It might be another section of the class. It's a variety here. I use the pronoun I. May I use the pronoun I, or do you want me to stay out of it? So, you're thinking about, what format you're going to use there, kind of getting into different writing styles. Can they use pictures or illustrations? To me, all of this goes back to like that choice board. If you can give students choice in how they respond, you're going to probably get a better product. Now, again, that there's just some writing they have to do. You're prepping them for college. They've got to know the structure of certain types of writing that are expected for college. And I have contacted like a Northwest ELA professor because I got into a conversation with a teacher one time that told me and this was it was a teacher at an elementary level that told me that it had to be 5 paragraphs and they had to have 5 sentences in every paragraph. And that's what's the structure. 5 paragraphs and 5 sentences in each paragraph. So I said, that's interesting. I've not heard that before. Where, what's the expectation? Where'd you hear it? She said, well, at the college, that's what they expect at Northwest. So I'm like, okay, because you just challenged me. So I went ahead and I contacted the tutoring department at Northwest and ELA. No, we have to teach kids how to unlearn that, tell them to stop doing that. And this was happening in a 4th grade classroom, just to give you a little context. She said, no, don't do that. And then I had a university professor speak at one of my, I had a 2 or 3 day training for 6 trades, just to come in and say, these are our expectations when kids come to us. Because I think, you're preparing them for that. Hey, let's find out what you're preparing them for and make sure that you're not using excess energy to do something that they have to help kids unlearn, some bad habits. So, going back, give them choice. If choice gives ownership, there are, like I just said, times where they have to do on-demand kind of writing. But in most cases, you can be a little flexible. And then when is it due? So after I hand it in, can I continue to work on it? Some of you have mentioned rough drafts. That still gives kids a chance to look at it and see how they can improve. So you have that goal, remember, that they're working towards and where they are in relation towards that goal. What is it you want them to be able to know and do? You want them to be able to grow as a writer, right? They get that through feedback, which we've talked about a few ways how you might find a little bit of time for that. But we want them to grow. We want to have that continued support. So when you're thinking about the organizational structure of your expectations for writing, go back to your standards. What are your standards asking you to do? And then think, how can I build some choice in to this? How can I build in an audience for them? One way too to look at things a little bit differently is just doing rafts. This has been around for quite a while, but the students will take on a role, audience, format, what's the structure of the piece, what's the topic going to be, and then strong verbs is added in some cases. Some people just do raft. Some think about word choice embedded in this as well. I don't think I had this in your handout. I forgot to take some of these numbers off, so I apologize for that. But I can send you more information if you, like, if you're new, or if this is something unfamiliar to you. I have like probably a folder with all kinds of RAF stuff in it that you can look. Now, there's some great resources online for this as well. This gives you just some examples up here. Here's some roles. A discouraged math student. Your audience is going to be a teacher. It's going to format a note left on her desk. Here's why I can't do math is the topic. Here's a new teacher role. Audience, you're writing to a colleague, true confession format. When I see that low-level class coming, that's your topic. I know, like in the past, a teacher from St. Joe shared that they did Civil War, and the kids took on different roles. So you're building in voice as well. So when you're doing a raft, and like different students, like one was a Union soldier, one was a Confederate soldier, one was a spy, one was a sweetheart left behind. And the the Union soldier whose sweetheart had been left behind, he had like a diary. The kid had used tea bags to stain the pages to make them look old. Then the one who was a sweetheart at home, she had picked a violet and pressed it in like her little diary that was sent from her sweetheart that was out on the field, and wrote about what it meant to her. So, you know, there's different ways to use graphs. There's different, it'll fit into any content area as well. That's one reason I like it. So that takes us on to voice. And before, I laid this down for a reason. Before we go on, we talked a lot about leads, or somewhat about leads yesterday, and conclusions. And on page 10, I think 11 and 12, there are, oh, and 13, I forgot I stuck that one in there. There are different types of examples to hook your reader, because when you're thinking about organization, you're also thinking about, all right, how do I hook my reader in? How do I want them to continue reading and reading more? So you can start out like with a question, a riddle, automatopoeia, exaggeration, whatever. Descriptive. One thing I did when I was teaching with this is I posted different ones in my classroom. So I started out like, I just had a flashlight out of construction paper on my wall, because remember, a lead shows you the way, it helps guide you. And then I made it like, you know, just use sentence strips to make it look like, you know, rays coming from the flashlight. I did a mysterious lead. You know, it was a dark and stormy night. And I just wrote that on the sentence strip. And I did one that was like a question. I had one that was a fairy tale. And that's how I always taught my students about leads. I always started out with fairy tales, because how does every fairy tale start? Once upon a time. And how does every single one end? They lived happily ever after. So when I taught conclusions, we talked about that. That was something they were all familiar with. Some kids start out really strong on leads, and it just, yeah, they just lose it. And that's where you start getting, it was all a dream, or the end, or, you know, or I made this all up, it was all fake, or, you know, just all these bizarro. So you have to teach conclusions. And by the way, I did have the nonfiction leads in here as well. So for those of you that do other content. And then on page 13 are the conclusions.
I like that. I love how all they know is the restating. And then it ends up being-
Yeah, that's the other one. It was like,
It's like, no, you don't literally need to copy and paste. Like, that's what they end up doing.
because they fall back on what they know, because they just.
Well, I usually tell them just write the body first, especially for like essay things. Just write the body. And then you can come up with your ways to do your bookends on either way after that, but get the stuff that you know. But so many times I feel like, okay, I don't know how to start it. It's like, well, then don't, like, just write the stuff that
Yes,
you
you
know.
know, and then
come
that
back and do
triggers.
this. You don't have to write it chronological. order,
Right.
but I think they do.
And that was one thing I always had trouble with, like back in the day when they'd ask you to do an outline. I
Where you're
always,
going.
no, I wrote my paper first and then I went and did the outline because it was required. I always did that because that's not how I think.
Right.
And yeah, so I like that idea. I'm stealing that one right there. Yeah. So thinking about this, they do have the restatement of the main idea down on this conclusion. The other thing that you want to do though is use mentor text. I mean, just show different examples of mentor text and how do they conclude it. This one is a sweet, but Marty, do you have? Yeah. It is just, it's a tearjerker one. But, you know, I watched the water ripple as the sun set through the maples, and the chance of a kindness with Maya became more and more forever gone. So that's a sad but true ending, right? There's a lot of different ones out there. Charlotte's Web, sad but true ending. There's just such a variety that you can utilize. So you have to start collecting and thinking about what it looks like. Regardless of what your content is, look and see at the structure of articles, text, whatever within your content area, and then steal from them. You know, post those in your room, have conversations about them. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, as well as, like, I used to post the transition words. These are pretty basic ones. There's a lot, I don't know if I stuck that one in there. Nope, I didn't. There's a more formal list as well. And if you want that, I can dig and see if I can find it. I know I've got it someplace.
In conclusion, every single time.
Yeah, instead of in conclusion, multiple times, because that's, again,
All in all.
Nobody says. Only freshmen trying to end their essays saying. all in all.
Well, I'm trying to talk about like more of like a content-based transition.
we're not
'cause I
telling
think they
them to
only
put all
know
of it.
like chronological transitions as far as like, I'm telling it to you in this order. And so all of their transitions are almost always, first I'm gonna like say they're always
Yes.
numerical order.
yes.
Instead of like, no, make it content-based as far as how is this relation, how is this idea related to this? And so it's always
Make
first.
the connection in your sentence.
Second.
You don't need that awkward transition.
Right? Or somehow, I don't know how this happened. They write the transition, like that usually would be your topic sentence for the paragraph. They were trying to learn to transition from one paragraph to the next. So instead, all they did is they moved that next to the previous paragraph. Do you ever get
Mhm.
that? And then it's just in the previous paragraph. It's like, no, you didn't. You just moved it to another paragraph. You still didn't explain the relationship between the two of them. And so it just says like, in conclusion, this is this, and then they do the conclusion in the next paragraph.
And that's again, yeah, because it's aggravating. And like you guys were talking about, my students used hints. Once I taught them hints, you know, you know how many third grade papers I read that said hints, da, 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 da. And I was like, so after a while, you know, they kind of got over it, but it was kind of new and they were like so excited because it sounded so grown up.
I was telling Sarah yesterday when you were talking about word choice, as soon as you say word choice, I was happy that you had verbs instead of adjectives, because like that's the thing that people do as soon as they try to sound like, oh, I'm gonna do word choice, and then they just start using the word plethora. Like that's the thing that they think, if I use plethora, a plethora of instead of many or lots, they're like, I got this word choice thing down. No, that's
No,
not.
sometimes many is what you need to use, you know, sometimes it will work.
It does,
but-
plethora seems out of place. There's never-
But yeah, that's again where like your mentor text is so
Right.
helpful, and just really letting them delve into it and look about what kind of transition words are being used. You know, how did they transition from, you know, one paragraph to the next? What do you know? So they don't even have to necessarily read for content or meaning. They just need to see those examples and look at a variety of conclusions, you know, find some different ones out there in like whatever source material that you're using. Sometimes
one activity that I have done before with this training is I have the introduction and I have the conclusion, the last statement, but they're all mixed up. And so the kids have to cut, yeah, they have to sort, and find the introduction that matches the conclusion. And I would love to do that like in history. I mean, in a social studies class to, moments in history about how something began and then find the conclusion. That could be kind of fun, but I'm kind of strange sometimes on stuff like that. But anyway, all of these kinds of things, I would, again, the mentor text, start just being collectors, kind of start being aware of it yourself and start looking and share not only among yourselves, your colleagues, but connect with other school districts. You've got friends that teach in other schools, reach out to them and say, hey, what's some text that you're using? I need to see some examples, or even student samples as well, letting them look and see, okay, how did this student, transition from this paragraph to the next? How did they conclude it? Barely, or whatever, therefore, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm thinking about Shakespeare, the hokey pokey yesterday. So we're going to get into voice here a little bit. And voice, again, is when you really can just recognize that. I included this one because images, again, can be used for voice. They can teach that. So I have two pieces of art here. They both display flowers. But what can you tell about the voice of each one? What do you see that's maybe a little bit different, that's particular?
The left one's a little bit more abstract, but it has more natural flow to it.
Okay, so abstract versus more realism. Other things you notice that speak to the voice.
The color in the left one is, just kind of leaps out at you, kind of almost even in an aggressive manner compared to the one on the right.
Okay, so you just said something that still voice evokes emotion. So when you're talking about a little bit more aggressive, type of color there.
The one on the right's much more calming, but left is very stiff to me.
Okay, yeah, but the colors are a little bit more muted over here. So that's what you do with images. You pull up, it can be the same topic, but it's presented in two different ways. And thinking about voice, just what does it make you feel? What emotion does it evoke? Now this one, I'm almost sure it was Picasso. When I brought these, I can't remember on this one if it was like Van Gogh or maybe Matisse. I don't know.
I thought the one on the right was Picasso.
You thought this one was, I think. I have, you know what? I have no idea because I slept since then. I can't remember which one I did. It's something that you can do with students, showing those images. Here's one. I don't know, this might not be showing up very well, from history. And here you have someone that looks like they're ill in bed. Here's someone being crowned.
Pretty sure they're both. The one on the right is nine, and boy is crowning white queen after he crowned himself.
Oh, that's good to know.
Then you're grandfather.
So again, getting them to notice the similarities and differences and thinking about this from not only, you can bring in the trait of ideas here again because of the details, but the other thing to think about is the emotion that they evoke. So that's voice. So, whoops, with this one, what emotion does it evoke versus the one over here? And now I know it's Napoleon, so that's really good for me because I did not know that.
I
So,
think, going back to the one with flowers.
Uh-huh.
we obviously all thought the right one was more calming or whatever, but we need to be careful that we don't do, this is bad and this is good.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's a good
Yeah, it's
point.
just two different voices, two different ways of looking at it, but we don't want to say, oh, this was the good way.
Mhm. That's an important thing to remember. It doesn't matter what your image is with that. This is another one where I've used like the primary source analysis tool when I'm comparing and contrasting different pictures. So you can do that with them as well. This again was one of the images they have that I wanted to share with you from the New York Times. This is actually, I don't know, GIF or GIF. I've heard, I say GIF, but I heard somebody else say it the other way. So it's like gyro, I don't know anymore. So with this, this one, it will, I think I may have hyperlinked it. It's one that you can what do you think it's saying? So I thought that was kind of interesting to get some perspective. Here was one of the images that from the New York Times that I found very curious. Again, one that you could use. It evokes emotion. It evokes some kind of feeling. It's one that you could use a primary source analysis tool with. This could also be used as just a prompt. It could be used as an introductory. You can use any of those pictures in your setting. So what do you think is happening in this one?
I don't think it works for the public.
Ah,
I think it's moved that down the wrong pothole.
I'm just, one of the things that I
I mean,
just.
like the law enforcement officers looking at them like, you know, it's roped off for a reason. Like, this is the like learning the lesson the hard way. I don't know.
I just really love the expressions on the faces.
Mhm.
I mean, that's really what draws me in. So, you know, think about again, how you can use some of these pictures, those images to get some emotion, some voice out. You have kids respond to something like this, you're going to have a wide variety, I think, of thoughts shared.
That reminds me of a picture I just saw this morning on the news. It was a picture of a car in a swimming pool. And it was a 15-year-old kid learning to drive and got the brake and the gas pedal mixed up. So him and his instructor ended up at the bottom of the pool. Oops.
Oops, major.
That has nothing to do with this.
No, but it's still those, it's one of those images that you need to go ahead and keep because it's a great one for writing. You know, how do you think that kid was feeling? How do you think, what did the instructor think? You know, having him go back and thinking about raft, the role, audience, format, topic, you could bring in a lot of conversation and discussion there. You know, the same way with raft, you could do Harriet Tubman. You know, your role is Harriet, or maybe your audience is Harriet Tubman. You know, it could be very interesting, especially this year. You never know what's going on. All right, or I don't anyway. Some different podcasts that are out there that are awesome for voice are This I Believe. It's on NPR. And after you've introduced the concept of voice, have the students listen to one of the podcasts. You're going to have that mood, that tone. You can talk about how it's structured. There's different things, podcasts too on Science Friday that are excellent, and they have a teacher section. So for any of your science friends can listen to, but these are just some resources I wanted to give you for teaching voice. This is something that I stole, I think, from Dixie Groupie. No harm is done to history by making it something someone would want to read. So it's okay to include and make it a little bit more, I don't know, engaging.
Less dry.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're looking at resources, think about it from, is this something that I would want to read? Is this something that, and if you're not sure, contact somebody outside your content area and have them look at it. Is it something that's engaging? These are things too, just having students look at different text examples. One of the things, there was something I wanted to ask you guys to do with this, but one of the, with this, just comparing like different text structures and looking at them in different ways in again, that voice organization piece, how you want to bring that in. So there's some suggestions looking at the textbook, maybe a source material and poems. Just having them compare and contrast, they can all be on the same topic. So that takes us into word choice. So we're going to do some things here with this. So with word choice, one of the things that can be done with this one, and I just had some sports terms up here, is having them focus on two different concepts that you're teaching. So in this case, it was basketball and soccer. Now, all the terms below that have something to do with this. So first of all, I would like for you just to go ahead and write at least a 7-word sentence using the first concept, basketball. And you have to utilize 2 of the words below here in your at least 7-word sentence. Okay, so you're going to use the first concept word, basketball. You're going to write at least a 7-word sentence using at least 2 of the concepts here for vocabulary, words or phrases. Okay, and once you're finished, you can go ahead and share your sentence with a partner at your table. Okay. I'll let you finish up what you're sharing. And I'm going to have you use the second concept, soccer. But this time, I want you to use at least 3 of the terms. And you can have a sentence that is over 5 words. You can.
Okay.
Okay. minimum of 5 words. You're using second concept, and you have to use 3 of the terms. Minimum of 5 words. I could have tilted the screen for you.
No, they're the colors, they're.
Oh, yeah, they're kind of hard to see on that dark background. It looks good when it's on my screen on my computer, but sometimes when it's projected. And once you've finished, you can go ahead and share again. Yes. Or is that the goal? Okay.
I'm trying to add voice and personality. When I think soccer, I think I don't know if she still plays soccer. She was trying to look like a story format. For a newscast.
All right. That's good. You guys are good. Sorry, I think I got distracted here a little bit. Now, what I want you to do, the last thing, you're going to use both concept words. You have to use 3, let's stick with 3 of the terms here. And let's go ahead again, back to a 7-word sentence. Okay, so you have to use,
Supposed to be 7 words?
it can be longer than 7
Oh,
words,
okay.
minimum of 7.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have to use both concepts?
You have to use, for this last sentence, use both concepts, 3 terms, and at least a 7-word sentence.
I did that.
No, no. If you did that, then you can go ahead and just use the first concept and use, just use one. Okay, you're fine. You were just being advanced. And you're like, no, you're advanced. Yeah. And don't forget to share.
That's good. That's good. Great.
I said, Abby was asking a bunch of issues.
That's a- No. My brother, I don't understand how basketball and soccer, it's the same terms for different sports, including dribbling and then. What was the same? Dribbling and dribbling. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I did more just scripted here and then more like narrative.
I like narrative better. I'm a story person.
Okay, so with this, what did you notice about the differences in your sentences?
Jackie can't follow directions.
Oh, I was following directions.
She was just being an advance.
Out of order.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's all good. Did this make you think in a little bit different way? You really have to understand the concepts and you have to know the meaning in which words are associated with them. As Marty pointed out, there are some terms here that apply to both. So you can utilize this. But to me, this is an activity that you could do for bell work, maybe review from the previous day. It also could be an exit ticket. You could find out, okay, which kids really totally understand the concept. It doesn't take much time. I mean, I went ahead and had you do it 3 different ways. You could just go right ahead and jump to combining both concepts, and you can assign however many words you want to have them do that with words that are associated with each concept. So I don't know, other thoughts on this, ways to do it?
I had just said, like, in a story, you can have 2 different characters, a bunch of traits, and they have to hold, write sentences about the characters, or you could have chapter or different plot stages and different events. And you have to write what happened in that particular plot stage of those different events.
It's just a different approach. And again, it's a short, quick way to look at something to find out, like, do they understand the concepts? Do they get it? So you could be a good check for understanding piece. Could be a little formative assessment tool as well. So just tying that in there. We're going to go ahead right now and finish up with word choice in the content area. We're going to look at this one. And I just think it's really important. It's summer, it's hot. You're out there, you're probably doing some perspiring or glowing, depending on who you are. So I have an article that I would like for you to read about sweat glands. And let's go ahead, Marty. Would you mind passing again? Thank you. By the way, it is 2-sided. And be sure that you take copious notes, a lot of notes. And that, any terms or phrases that are unfamiliar to you, you can go underline or circle, whatever works for you. Thanks, Marty.
Okay, how many of you are really getting into this article?
Oh,
good Jackie is. She's excited. All
I
right.
like linguistics, so I'm looking through the different words, I'm like,
I know,
okay, this means this,
that's-
that's what I'm like.
So
When
you're
I got to
using some
tubular, I
background.
circled it, I'm like, party on, wing, party on guard.
So with that, we have to think about the kinds of word choice students are exposed to in their textbooks, right? What they're reading and how much does that help them in their writing? So when you're looking at this, what genre is this text? Say it loud so everybody hears. Come on, Mike.
Nonfiction.
Nonfiction, it's informational text, definitely. What words might students find a little bit challenging?
Every other.
Yes.
Like 30% of them.
So it is a challenging piece. What kind of background knowledge do they need? Obviously, something in linguistics might be helpful, thinking about word origins.
Probably need these.
Right, right. You know, they're gonna have to definitely have some biology background here. And so when we think about this, why does it matter? Because if kids can't understand what they're reading, I mean, it's not, number one, they're going to start shutting down. Number two is this article is not helping them in any way, shape, or form improve their writing ability. I mean, with some of these terms, when are they going to come across, you know, some of these words, unless they are going to be somebody who's going to be a technical writer in the science field. This is very much a science article. It's written from that format, but this is kind of the text that kids come across in science class. And it can be very challenging for them. And your kids who are, I mean, just your average kiddo, I mean, they're going to try and power through and do the best they can, but, you know, will they understand it? That's something to remember. So I'm going to give you a second article here. You already know you're on call. There you go. And I would like you to read this article. It's the one that Marty's passing out. Thanks, Marty. Mhm. So Houston, we have a fungus.
You say the description. Read or-
Go ahead and read it. You can go ahead again. You can mark it up if you want to. You can find some words that students might be unfamiliar with. And remember to highlight those. I don't think I gave the directions, Jackie, honestly, other than read it, so. The way it printed off might have come off a little wonky, so just be aware of that, since it was copied from a book. And I'm just going to ask you to stop when you come to the end of your sentence. Just interest of time. So in this case, in Houston, we have a fungus. What genre is the text?
Nonfiction. I mean, it's like nonfiction, but it's also.
Right, it's written in kind of a
Yeah.
narrative kind of format.
Yeah.
It's that piece. What are words that your students might find a little bit more challenging? Were there any that you came across that were maybe a
You mean
little?
like tier two or like tier three?
Both.
Okay. I was looking at more like, so something like a pressure suit, even though that's not like, they know what pressure is and they know what like a suit is, but specifically what the purpose of some of those things are.
Command module.
Yeah, some of those.
Some of
Yeah.
those that they might need to just focus on in that content area vocabulary. So how did that compare to the first article? Were there about the same as, less than, more than?
Easier to, yeah.
This one was easier to interpret, to understand. Background knowledge, like understanding, pressure suit, command module, those
But I
might be
think
some
the
issues.
context of the, I mean, around them lets you know kind of.
So it gives you some insight.
Definitions like
Right.
the first one. We had to really
Really.
dig through to figure out, okay, is this classified as this or whatever, yeah.
So when you think about this, really, what does this let us know a little bit about the text that our students are reading? And when we do have a choice in what they are reading.
Answer the question again, I'm sorry.
When we're thinking about the text that we ask our students to read, what do we need to really think about? What do we need to consider? When you're looking at both examples, when we think of some of that text that they see in textbooks that might be somewhat similar to that first article, that's going to be very challenging as far, the word choice is overwhelming in that first
Right.
article.
I mean, both of them, they talk about the apocrine glands. I mean, so, but in the second one, you get a better feel for what it actually does. And they're
Right.
talking about the function of it. And the other one, you're going, okay, there's these two types of glands. This one is just like a subset of this one and try to figure that one out. But this one lets you know the practical application.
Right, exactly. They give you an example, so right there, the kids can go ahead, they understand it. And we all understand a little bit better if we're given an example of what something might be like. So when you're thinking about word choice, be very selective about what you're asking kids to read and seeing, this, in other words, this means da, 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 da. Does it give some examples? Does it give some meaning? Because students will really struggle with this. It almost gives you it helps evoke an image, if you will, in your mind in this second article versus the other. So we have to think about the vocabulary that we're teaching, the vocabulary that's embedded within the text that we're using, and how we can help our students to grow in word choice through that text. We want them to acquire word choice. Will they be more likely to acquire word choice through the second article than the first because they were given examples? Yes. That first one, that was just overwhelming. I mean, you're just drowning in technical jargon, and it was just too much of a good thing. We'll put it that way. So one of the things you can also do with this is doing a little summarizing activity. And the summarizing activity is kind of a 4-2-1. This is one that I think I'm going to have to give you the directions on, and I want to find where I had this, because we have, with summarizing, it's just one of those, let me see here. I laid some pages down and then I messed everything up here. But you can go ahead and have write down 4 things solo that you learned from the article. And just using that last article that we looked at, just write down 4 solo pieces of information or takeaways.
The article itself, or like our analysis of the 2 articles.
No, just from that last article you read.
We didn't get our way through it, do you want to?
If you need to get enough information, you can, or if you want to just read it, you can do it. Just looking to see how body language here. It's my continuing section. Okay, once you have your 4 things, what I want you to do is you're going to get with a partner. So if there's a team of 3 at your table, you're going to have to find someone, because you're odd man out, or odd woman out, going to have to find a partner, and you are going to share your 4 choices, and between your partner and yourself, you're going to go ahead and narrow it down between the 2 of you to 2 takeaways. All right. So get with a partner, share your 4 takeaways, and between the 2 of you, narrow them down to 2 takeaways between yourself and your partner. So that means between yourself and your partner, you can only have 2. So out of your 4, you're probably going to have maybe 1 unless your partner had one of the same ones as you. All right, so find a partner. And you guys, you might just stay at 10-3 because we're all numbered, so we'll be okay. You guys want a partner? All right, taking one for a team, okay. I just can't get past the Nebraska hat. I'm so- I'm a Mizzou fan.
Yeah, same. Did you go to Mizzou? Did you go out here?
My daughter went her freshman year, I went out here. And, but my sister and her family were in Columbia. So, yeah, we've been to, they're big, you know, tailgate, the whole shebang. And, so it became pretty hot and heavy.
I had a lot of research there too.
So this is kind of good activity. It's good for kids to do.
That they were expecting. First this situation. Sitting there. Chairs. Sitting, strapped into this chair. Under food socks that you yeah. Researchers that just different parts and radius. Okay, yeah, that's, well, I don't want to do that.
So after we narrow down our two.
Okay, we're going to talk
Oh,
about
okay.
our next one.
So
Deb.
all we're good.
You're good if you have it narrowed down to your two.
Yeah. That's okay. That's something that I was willing to do.
Let's see how much. time. If you guys have it narrowed down to two, just give me a thumbs up so I know it's ready to go on. Okay, perfect.
Research.
She spoke to me, but that's how I realized, and she said, no, it's this new, so I realized. Okay, maybe if she had gone like this, and I did not choose it.
Yeah.
Are you guys?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, I think I'm just waiting for one.
We're staying. Yeah, and there's an older one. Yeah. She was good. No. I think they moved in.
Okay,
Freshmen.
our next direction, once you have those narrowed down, is this. You're going to go ahead and now your pairs, your partners are going to square with another set of partners. You're going to share your two takeaways. So you guys would share yours with another set of partners. You'll share yours. And then you have to narrow it down to one. Okay, have to narrow it down to one. All right, so we'll are back to wherever you guys want to go. You can, you're going up here to the front. So then you guys will square up. Oh, yeah.
I say it again, I don't know. Oh.
Just carpet laid yesterday.
Most of it.
Most of it.
Got to do the edges yet, or you got to cut them?
Oh, that's not.
It take just as long. Yeah. We're about done. Looks like it's about done. I think they want the corner where the edges all glued. I think I'll cut them first and then just glue them and lay them in the same pot. Try to go faster. Spread out 4 foot of glue, cut them. Yeah, that's how they said to do it, but I think that's a little taxi.
Okay, once you have them narrowed down to one, stay there, don't leave yet. You might want to get a chair. What I want you to do is the one that you picked as your team, write everything you know about the one you selected. Everything you know about the one factor or one takeaway you selected.
Oh, thank you.
So with your team, you're writing down everything you know about this one. The one you selected. You're making my knees hurt.
That produces that cloudy. Yes.
Yeah, that's what they're targeting.
So I was hoping to get some generous sentences, but I don't think that's gonna happen. So I had a Kelly Gallagher article, but I had a lot of other stuff. And get to it.
Better to have two
I thought
bucks.
with this
man.
one, I just scrolled right through this, but not so much.
Janera says, hey.
Hi, Janelle.
Capture.
Had two scheduled, and then a couple others that showed up.
Just random. Mm-hmm. What was like off of a certain school? Yeah. It's just interesting.
One from each school and Horseman, St. Greg's, and then two people that were. One was moved here, one was potentially.
Okay, I'm just in the interest of time, I'm going to stop you. But with this being said and done right now, what I would do as a teacher is I would collect your writing. And then I would look through it and see, okay, are they understanding this lesson? Are there misconceptions that I need to deal with the next day? Are there some other things that I can build off of on this lesson? So it just is kind of a nice way, and hopefully you'll be able to do some more engaging kind of writing activities like this with your students this coming year, safely. One of the things too that I want you to think about as well is, what would this look like in your classroom? How might you be able to use this, and with what kind of source material would you use it? So just stay with your team, or if you feel better to go back to your home base, that's all right too. Just to have some conversation about what this might look like in your classroom, in your content area. Might work for you. So if you guys want to go back to social studies land, you can do that.
I think middle school kids would find this article fascinating.
Oh, yeah, because they like
Don't you?
anything smelly and
Yeah. it's
stinky
totally
and
versus- yeah, I
dirty.
think it would be so cool.
Quadrant activity with the very first quadrant. The top half of her, and I'm thinking middle
Oh,
school.
they'd be all over that, wouldn't they?
Mhm.
Anything fun like that.
And they would want to know, what is this that's blacked out? right here?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
What did she mark out that we can't read?
That was something, who I got this from. She was a high school teacher, and she just said it was a little bit too more graphic than
That's
what
what
she wanted to deal with.
That's
So
what I
that's why
said.
she went ahead and blacked it out. Yeah, coming from the same kind of mindset.
Yep.
So thinking about this, any ideas, thoughts about how you might utilize it? This activity? I don't know, you can call it whatever you want. It's just kind of summarizing.
How long is the full text?
Oh, goodness sakes, I honestly don't know. I can't answer that question. You might be able, the information is on there. so you
Right,
can
yeah, I
just
saw that.
Google it. Any other thoughts? I like summarizing, because I think that's a skill that students really lack, and it's something also in writing that you can tie in, because really what this activity does, you're addressing not only looking at word choice that we talked about earlier, but you're also thinking about ideas. You're pulling out
We were
those.
talking about like
learning.
something that they do struggle with, even like at the high school level, is differentiating between like a supporting detail and what the main idea is. And so especially there's a unit in our textbook, we're like, oh yeah, units 5 and 6, like, because unit 5 is like main idea and object purpose. And unit
Mhm.
6 is like persuasive and like argument and that sort of thing. And so we were talking about different essays and stuff that they read
Oh, yeah.
and how you could do this with it.
To make it really,
And they could,
Yeah.
even if, because some of them, they read it and they just organically know what the thesis is or organically know what the main idea is because they've read a lot. And some of them, this would be good reassurance. And if some of them don't really know for sure, it'd be a good way for them to arrive at the same conclusion.
well, you can be very purposeful in who you partner with.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the material that they're reading. Yeah, I think I like that too. Another idea for them to steal. It's just one of those things too, it's safe for them.
The one thing that might be kind of a sticky wicket is having them agree, when they have to narrow it down quite a bit, right? So it might be, you can adjust the numbers, but when I've done this with adults, I haven't had any fistfights or anything over agreeing on which two to narrow it down. But I think it's very helpful for you as a teacher also to see, are they understanding the gist of the lesson, as well as do they understand what summarizing is? It's like I mentioned, ideas, you're bringing in those less than obvious details, that important information. You're bringing in, again, a little bit of, you're bringing in organizational skills, a little bit of voice. There's so much that you can do with this activity. So with that being said, I still have this much more to go through with you. And obviously, that's not going to happen, right? So the time frame, I think, yeah, I gotta just speed talk. Well, on the next slide here, so we have that. I will show you this really quick because this is kind of a fun activity. I shared it with elementary. Generative sentences, and I mentioned that I was going to share this with you yesterday. You have the word, position, and length that you have to think about. And this comes from Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry. They've got a great website, Fisher and Fry, and it's Frey. But it makes kids pay attention to grammar and the word meaning. It works with different content areas. And like if you just tell the kids to use like the term volcanoes and use it in the fourth position, you might get a sentence like this. The name for volcanoes in the Pacific is called the Ring of Fire. Well, that student, it's obvious they understand what a volcano is. Versus this student, I don't like volcanoes, okay? Volcanoes is in the fourth position, but does that illustrate that they understand volcanoes and their purpose? No. So what you can do is have them have the word, what position it's going to be in, and how many sentences or how many words the sentence has to be. So if we use cell and put the word cell in the third position, length has to be 6 words.
But also be
And
not
also-
that students ever would share answers, but you could also give them different numbers to make sure that they weren't like.
Oh, yeah,
One
definitely.
person could have it, random numbers.
Well, the other thing too with this is cell is a word with multiple meanings.
Right, oh, yeah.
So again, you can find out, do they understand the context of the word cell in whatever it is you're teaching? So this is a fun one to use. You could do because. And we don't like to have sentences start with because,
You can do it.
but
Independent clause, it works.
if you have, 10 words here, it's going to make a little bit different. Constitution has to be the last word in the sentence, and it has to equal exactly 10 words. So that will illustrate their understanding. Brian has a copy of this PowerPoint, so if you need more information on this, it's a good activity to use with vocabulary. I mean, not maybe every day, but again, it can be entrance, bell word, exit ticket, formative assessment, pick out 2 or 3 words to do. Less is more. You can find out as much from less as you can from more sometimes. So I'm going to stop there because it is way too close to time for the other stuff that I have. And I just don't want to be yakking at you. But the couple of things in the handout, I do want to point out to you. I did include graphs. It's on page, 30. Right before the songs. 31. So you do have some examples there. And a couple of other things that are in here. I really like this Dear John letter. It's on the other side of the wrapped assignments, because that Dear John letter
can be, have you seen that one?
You can punctuate it many different.
Yes.
Hmm.
So it can be, dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we are apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Gloria? I had a attendee one time who had just gotten divorced and she was not happy with this at all. And I said, just wait a minute. Yeah, because sample 2, dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me. For other men, I yearn. For you, I have no feelings whatsoever. When we're apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Gloria? So punctuation has power. So something to share with your kids. And I promise I'm stopping talking right now. Thank you, thank you, thank you, guys. That's so sweet. So any resources I can give you or share with you, just let me know.
You're just gonna share it with everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll go ahead and share this out. I'll share a recording of this and all the handouts and everything. I'll just press it.
Like you'll put it in the drive or you'll?
I'll probably just email it out.
Perfect.
So, yep.
I have this much overlap. So I did
What's that?
the top.
Yep. Yep, Sharon's already working on it.
Should be the orientation.
And then.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
It's looking hard right now. But.